Welcome to Varn Blog. I've been asking myself a lot that even though I've seen a lot of standard progressives freak out about the resistance, go protest Tesla and talk about swastikas and this, that, and the other thing. The only thing I've been really told to do by these people is to write my Congress people, which, I do on occasion. That basically what I need to do is to let them represent me. And after listening to what has come out that the Dems seem to want to do as their strategy for dealing with this, which is to move further right, drop the DEI stuff, not listen to NGO consultants. Some of that advice actually wouldn't even be bad. But then to get rid of the dependence on small donors. Basically, we want our tech oligarchs back. At least half of them. Here's the thing. This episode is dedicated to my long correspondent and erstwhile friend Keith. And Keith and I disagree on many things. He is more sympathetic to left nationalism and nationalism in general than me. He would point out that like Americans don't have health care, whereas Europeans, you have NATO to rely on us for security, even if it furthers the American empire, but Americans don't get a whole lot from it, including healthcare. And that's fair enough. But we've been asking, well, now that we're in the naked kleptocracy part of oligarchy, where you are seeing a response to real administrative bloat and real waste being responded to with a chainsaw by a billionaire, the richest man in the world, who also needs stock valuations to stay somewhat high. And then you see people on TikTok, whatever, pushing that what this is really about is devaluing the entire American country, so that the oligarchs can just buy it. I hate to tell you this, but they pretty much already have. Do you know why YIMBYism doesn't work? Yeah, for those of you who don't know, that is yes, you can. Apparently YIMBYism spread to Europe, which doesn't even make sense because it's of an American phenomenon, but it means if you build more, you can drop the price. The problem is there's plenty of tax incentives for holding on to the major supply of housing as a loss and still profiting off of it. And there's a massive difference between those who can afford a decent CPA and their taxes and those who can't. Taxes are more and more regressive, even under the Democratic administration. If you don't believe me, they were really concerned about being able to claw back petite bourgeois and contractor, aka Uber and DoorDash driver money during the first 2 years of the Biden administration. They weren't that concerned with raising the taxes or undoing the Trump tax cuts or any of that. They could have. They didn't. As Keith and I have talked about, a lot of people, both on the left and the right in the United States, want social peace for free. And the response to that has been LARPing, delusion. And we can blame the LARPers as much as we want. We can blame the delusion of MAGA people. We can blame the delusional communists. We can blame the delusional liberal resistance. There's all kinds of people who are perpetually wrong in American life that we can blame. Here's the thing. Most of these are responses to elite failure. Elite failure is endemic. There was plenty of elites who knew that Project 2025 was possible and knew it for at least 2 years. They had no plan other than Biden and Harris winning. It's a very similar sort of hubris that you saw with the Obama administration. They also had no plan to fix the ACA other than Democrats staying in power indefinitely. Now, when that was hubris when Republicans did it in the aughts, and when they may try to do it now and make, Trump God King at 78, It's a very short-lived God King. You're not going to have to worry for that long. Even if he makes it as late as his long-lived father, you're still only dealing with a decade. A lot can happen in a decade, but my God. So you're in the weird, broken, oligarchical republic stage of empire. And you're going to see people have a hard time dealing with the fact that a lot of things that we're democratizing, like democratizing the selection of the president. And why did we want to democratize the selection of the president in the 60s? Well, part of it was Congress as early as the 1930s was abnegating its responsibility. Cabinets are supposed to be the responsibility of Congress. They abnegated that. War declarations are supposed to be the responsibility of Congress. They abnegated that. Hell, the selection of the president was supposed to be a responsibility of the legislatures, the state legislatures, etc. They abnegated that. Now, I'm not here to say that the Madisonian vision of a republic is something that I would necessarily want, but the idea that the presidency and not the legislature is where your representative bodies really are and what's going to represent you, well, then that's a weird phenomenon. And there was a time where regional tensions were actually still maintaining this checks and balances. But even then, the Supreme Court, as early as the Warren Court, was having to do undemocratic things to maintain social peace between the regions, between different kinds of exploitation and the implications of empire. So we can blame the LARPers. We can talk about how I didn't believe the right things or you didn't believe the right things. But what are you going to do about it? Are you going to go to another protest? You're going to go to another riot? I hate to tell you these things, but most of the discussions I hear about protests today are about how they're good for solidarity, how they're good for the people doing them. Do they make them feel something? When is that a problem? When is the illusion of political power a problem for political power? Because I'm not saying there's never a reason to protest, but protests historically were about fielding an army. Then they're about fielding voters. What are they about now? Petitioning for grievance. Well, you petition for grievance to avoid a war, a civil war, the most violent forms of war, I may add. When people get all nostalgic about civil war and talk about it, they haven't seen one. Not that I have. I've only seen civil insurrections, and those are a lot bloodier than some wars. So what do you think's going to happen? It's not like an occupation where you can just run home. You can't actually abstract from one kind of war to another as some kind of universal rule. Occupations are always favoring the insurgents. Civil wars are Clausewitzian wars. They're about who's willing to kill the most people. I mean, how did the U.S. win the Civil War? They were willing to lose more of their army than the Confederates were because they had more of it to lose. You don't believe me? You can just look at the numbers. Grant threw a lot of Irish immigrants and stuff into a grist mill. But it did wear the South down, particularly when added to a blockade, which made it where the English capitalists couldn't trade with the South anymore for their textiles. So they went over and started making deals with powers in the Raj. Most left narratives don't deal with all the variables here because they don't want to. And right now, if I pick an ideologue of any variety, I can almost guess that they're probably going to be wrong about key things, including myself. I didn't take Project 2025 seriously enough because outside of him replacing a lot of the civil service, which I absolutely believed he would do, I never questioned that. I thought that it was too incoherent of a program to actually try, and that he couldn't believe that his base was stupid enough to ignore these other things. So it must be a way to catch the ideologues. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do all of Project 2025, and like stuff like Doge wasn't even in it. But yeah. But ask yourself a question on that when you go to that Project 2025 checker. Why aren't the Democrats asking you to do something other than protest or write your representatives? Most of you are in Democratic areas anyway. What's it going to matter? And the Republicans are clearly scared of their own base. They have, as of right now in early March, pulled down a whole lot of their public infrastructure. They don't want comment. They don't want Republicans doing town halls. They want to do like the Democrats did in 2020 during COVID and shut that shit down, which, by the way, the Democrats did. And I'm not here to pretend that both sides are the same. It's sort of irrelevant. All right. But what I see and where Keith and I agree and why he inspired this post in the first place, what I see is the following. Not only are there no adults in the room, not only do you not really have a response or an answer, but that most people can't really even imagine how to respond to it. And we're asking people to fight oligarchies without any money, resources, or time. And what are they going to do? And I'm not here to say that things are hopeless, but this is the question. What are you going to do? Are you going to turn people into memes for Narodniki actions? Narodniki, for those of you who don't know, are the Russian intellectia who became advocates for the peasantry and also did a lot of terrorism. And if you were serious about it, would you be posting about it on a massive surveillance system that everyone in the world can see, including the government? And not just your government, even. Why would you be, if you actually thought that things were really serious and that you were really doing this, why would you be using all these corporate platforms that exchange information with the government when you're talking about this stuff? They seem to know that you're not serious. Why don't you know that? So what are you going to do? Now, here's the thing. I don't have an easy thing to tell you to do. Work with labor, join labor clubs, write your Congress people, do what you need to do, prepare for a downturn, get your finances in order, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you think an oligarchy is just going to give you everything you want because they let another part of an oligarchy who was more craven and less sophisticated just burn parts of it all down, you're foolish. And you don't understand how we got here. After all, the Democrats still, even adjusting for the California things, lost more voters than Trump gained. And people might boo the American anthem and this, that, and the other because they think that this represents us all. Because Trump got a narrow 50%, and even that, a lot of what he's doing is not popular except with the most diehard Republicans, which at this point, they're so wedded to this idea, this personalization. They're so subsumed themselves. What do we expect? People might make fun of independents for not having a coherent ideology, but who the fuck does? So, yeah, what are you going to do? You should be mad at the Democrats. You should be calling for them to throw these 80-year-olds out, getting rid of the gerontocracy, even the good ones like Bernie Sanders. Why isn't Bernie Sanders really picked a successor beyond AOC? Why isn't it cultivated? Why did you get the squad and then Bowman and Bush get crushed and then nothing? And that politics is dying almost everywhere. Like, yes, the DSA has influence in New York. The Democratic adjacent part of the DSA has influence in New York and maybe can pull a mayor, although I'm still putting my money on Andrew Cuomo, even though I do not want him to win. Because money talks. And if you want to be able to resist money, it's not just mutual aid, although that's part of it. It's not just having the right ideology. It's not even having a party. It's having social power. Christians, when they had total social hegemony in much of the United States, even though they were diversified and at each other's odds, were not trying to force it upon the government. When they started to lose is when you see Christian nationalism move from implicit to explicit and start even self-violating and call all kinds of states of exceptions to its own moral code to be able to justify itself. That started in the 70s when secularization started creeping up. The hour of Minerva flies at dusk. Always too late. So, what are you going to do about it? Look, I get, how embarrassing this or that is, and um, we see all kinds of things about popularity. But this idea that saving the American Republic by turning the Democratic Party into George W. Bush's party, are that people like Robert Kagan's going to save us, or Ezra Klein. These people serve oligarchs because almost all these people do. Who can pay for the infrastructure? But what we know that the Democratic Party wants to give up on is people power. I mean, and admittedly, they annoyed us all with asking us for money constantly. We can tell by their response to Trump's 2 amber rambling that a lot of them are going to try to attack right and just hope that Trump does enough damage that they become popular again by default. When that happens and you end up in another situation like this, which we're not going to end up in a bunch, trust me, what do you do? So the question you should start asking people in power is, what are you going to do? And if they don't have an answer for it, and what should I do to support you other than vote, other than post, other than participate in endless discourse? And if they don't have a good answer to that, you should start looking at who and how you can primary them. If you're going to play this electoral game at all, you play it ruthlessly, you play it locally, because you don't have the push nationally. The more you try to rely on national politics by itself, the more you will be subject to oligarchs. We've been an oligarchy for some time. It's time we called it what it is. Protect your peace. You're going to need it.